In Colorado, they just did something really exciting. And of course, Catholic churches are now trying to put a stop to it because we can't have nice things. So let me tell you some backstory here. I may have talked about this, but it's been, I don't know, at least like a year and a half, I think, since I've discussed this. But in April of 2022, they did something really amazing in Colorado. They passed a law that funded universal preschool for like 4-year-olds across the state. Really incredible thing. This is April 2022. And basically, what they did with very little Republican support, the Democrats in Colorado, they passed a law saying kids could access half day preschool programs at no cost to their parents. The governor's office said it would save families an average of like $4,300 a year. It would obviously give kids a head start in their education. Just an awesome opportunity for families that might not have been able to afford those types of programs in the past. And by the way, since this program launched in 2022, I just looked this up. This is from this past summer. Colorado's $322 million universal pre-K program launched last August because, of course, they passed the law in 2022. It launched in 2023. It provided 10 to 30 hours per week of free preschool to 40,000 4-year-olds this past school year. So it's helping so many people, and you have to imagine their families are better off because those kids are getting that early education. Not only is it helping 40,000 kids, they're attending 1,900 participating schools, and this is where it gets interesting. 40 of those 1,900 schools are religious, like they're run by a church, and that is allowed. Those churches can also get access to state funds to run a preschool, but there are some rules. If you want to get funding or reimbursed for the preschool that you're running, schools cannot discriminate against students. They have to accept kids regardless of they or their families' race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, etc. And so a couple of years ago, when this law passed, 2 churches in the Denver Catholic Archdiocese sued. They sued state officials. They wanted to get taxpayer dollars, but they did not want to give up their bigotry. And basically, their argument was that Catholicism required them to reject students who have gay parents, and they didn't want to hire staffers who were in same sex relationships. They said they could not recognize the existence of trans people who are like unicorns. They don't really exist. And they couldn't use anyone's pronouns if they conflict with what was written on a birth certificate. You know how this works by now. They wanted to ban students from wearing, quote, the opposite sex's uniform or using what they deemed were the wrong bathrooms. And I just want to reiterate, we're talking about 4-year-olds here. They also said, we want to prioritize the acceptance of Catholic families over like Jewish or Muslim ones. And would that be religious discrimination that we're not allowed to do? And in fact, the state said, no, actually, that one's fine. If a Catholic church has a preschool and they want state funds, they are actually allowed to prioritize Catholic church members first until like they're full. And at that point, that's okay. But it didn't take a genius to understand why they were really suing. This was always about their ability to discriminate against LGBTQ people, right? And in their lawsuit, I'll show you a portion of it here. Oh, you know what? I'm going to get back to that in just a second. But one of the things they wrote is that this law is going to lead to intractable conflicts because a Catholic school cannot treat a same-sex couple as a family equivalent to the natural family. Ooh, those scary gay couples are unnatural. So that's the Catholic Church's position on all this, and there's a simple solution to all of that. Don't take the state's money. No one was forcing you to accept state money to run your preschool. You could just do whatever you did before the law was passed, right? Like if families wanted to send their kids to bigot factories, they had every right to do so, and no one was stopping them. Like no one was telling the church they had to do anything different. And the Catholic Church knew this, which is why when they filed their lawsuit, there was another argument in there that I found amazing. They said the law for universal pre-K was bad for business because if preschool is free at the place down the street, why would anyone pay the Catholic Church money for taking in their kids for preschool? And then if enrollment went down because everyone was sending their kids to the free preschool across the street, they would have to charge their own members even more money. And why didn't state officials care about the Catholic Church's bottom line? And you might think I'm exaggerating, but let me show you what they wrote in the lawsuit. Look at line 23. By creating a program that provides universal funding for preschool programs, Colorado has cornered the market for preschool services. Any providers who do not participate in the universal pre-K program will be severely disadvantaged since they will be forced to charge significantly higher prices than the participating programs, both secular and religious, which are not religiously barred from participating in the UPK program. Like, they're so desperate. They're like, well, if you help other kids, what about our desire to not help them? It would be really bad for us. Not only that, they were funded by the right-wing religious group Becket Law, and this is what they said in their press release about this lawsuit. Check this out. This ban, they acted like the law was a ban on Catholics. This ban forces parents to choose between paying out of pocket for the cost of faith-based preschool or receiving a free preschool education at any other private school in Colorado. So, it also hurts the ability of schools like St. Mary's and St. Bernadette's to compete with other preschools that can offer free preschool education. Listen, if you can't compete, get out of the marketplace. No one feels bad for you. These people are so mad that other people get nice things that they want to ruin it for everybody because Jesus told them to. They're in the marketplace of ideas. The Catholics are filing a lawsuit because they're like, we're going to be losers. The neutral rules that we have to play by are so unfair to us, it's illegal. And therefore, they said the rules need to change. Not us, not our beliefs, never our beliefs. I mean, this is the epitome of broken brain religion for you, right? A program that would lift up families that cannot afford early childhood education and which could help students get a leg up on their formal schooling is a problem for these people, for these Catholics, because they prioritize their own bigotry over the needs of other children. And it's not just that the archdiocese wanted to end the program for everybody. They just wanted to be able to get the state funding and be bigots. All right. They wanted to discriminate against LGBTQ people and get government funding for doing so. If you watched my live stream last week, I talked about how a similar predicament happened in the state of Maine, where religious schools demanded government funding that was part of a state-sponsored program. And the lawmakers and the Supreme Court said, yep, they should have access to it. But then lawmakers passed a law saying, all right, fine, taxpayer dollars can go to religious schools as long as they don't discriminate. And what did religious schools do when that law passed? They said, all right, we don't want your money anymore. We would rather discriminate than get your money. But those religious schools have since filed an appeal because they also want the ability to get state funding and discriminate while getting the money. So this is kind of the same game being played here. It is telling that there is nothing in this lawsuit that they filed about their right, the archdiocese's right to reject divorced parents or anyone who's had an abortion, because those are also sins in the Catholic Church's eye. But the church has never really had a problem with any of those sins. Like, they have their own made up sin hierarchy, and being a trans person who wants to exist, that's a bigger problem for them than someone who's been divorced 3 times, like Clay Higgins was in the last story. So anyway, that's a lawsuit they filed in 2022 when this universal pre-K law in Colorado passed. And this past summer, a U.S. district judge in Colorado, actually ruled mostly in favor of the state. He said, yeah, the state's not doing anything wrong here, by and large. They're not discriminating against religious schools by saying all participants have to abide by non discrimination rules. But the judge also said this isn't a total win yet because you know how you allowed Catholic schools to prioritize members of their own religion over Muslim students and Jewish students and people like that? That is a faith based exemption to the non discrimination law. So the question is, are faith based exemptions okay or not? Because the judge said the state cannot have it both ways. You can't say a Catholic church is allowed to be exempt from the rules when it comes to who they can take in on the basis of religion, but then put these rules that they're not allowed to discriminate for other reasons. You got to do it all or nothing. So that's interesting. Now, the Catholic schools at the time, they called that a victory, but because it wasn't the complete victory they wanted, they are now this week appealing the decision. They're not done fighting this in court. They want the court, and if not the appellate court, they want the US Supreme Court to say we should be allowed to get access to taxpayer dollars while also discriminating for any reason we choose because we have a cross on our clothes. And so they're fighting this. This is also interesting because all of this might be moot. According to a website, Chalk Beat Colorado, which reports on education, the state actually removed the non-discrimination rules altogether for this school year. And I was trying to find the exact documentation for this, and I had a hard time finding it. But it seems like the state is saying we would rather let a few Catholic churches take state money and discriminate in order to make sure the program in its entirety can still exist. So maybe a judge or a panel of judges says, all right, well, you brought a lawsuit, you got what you wanted, we're tossing this out. That would be way better than letting this case get to the US Supreme Court. And maybe Colorado lawmakers saw that possibility coming and they said, let's just not fight this battle right now. We'll get rid of the non-discrimination rules. It's possible. But it is also possible that this case remains in the courts because the Catholic groups want to fight it, and that could lead to bigger problems down the line. And I want to show you one of the things. This is from the Denver Post this past week. If the Catholic preschools win this appeal, it is possible Colorado children could be shut out of some preschools because of their or their parents' identities. That's true, because some schools could discriminate against them. And one parent said, it's so upsetting that there's so much hate for our kids, said Brittany, who's not involved in the lawsuit, but represents the kind of family that could be affected by it. She spoke on the condition that her last name not be published in order to protect her family's privacy. These kids are just kids. They don't have a political agenda. And also in the same argument, they bring up the Supreme Court case that said religious discrimination might be okay. And the second paragraph here, then that tees up the tension, said Robert Kim, executive director of the Education Law Center. The religious schools are arguing that having to abide by those non-discrimination policies violates our religious rights. So it's obvious that the goal of this lawsuit, it's not just about participating in the universal pre-K program, but getting this case to the Supreme Court so that the conservative supermajority can create another hole in the wall of separation between church and state. Because maybe they rule that religious beliefs can always be a loophole for people who don't want to follow the law while receiving government benefits. And that would be a terrible decision, but that's kind of the trajectory where this is going right now. And again, the irony is that no one was ever forcing the Catholic Church to do anything that violated its beliefs. The Archdiocese was just unhappy that everyone else was doing pretty damn well by rejecting their bigotry, and these churches did not want to be left behind. All right, I'm going to pause there for a bit. What questions we got here? Yay, Colorado, right? Like when you have a state run with a Democratic majority and a Democratic trifecta, you can actually get really cool things, whether it's Tim Walz and the Minnesota legislature getting free school lunches and I think breakfasts in Minnesota to something like this. Like good things happen when you elect smart people. They really want that money. I know they do. It's so easy. All they have to do is open their doors and not be bigots. And they're like, this is so hard. Oh, there's a preschool market. Dear God, capitalism sucks. Hey, right there with you. It's appalling that you have to pay to send your kid to preschool. But in some cases where it's not easily accessible and there isn't a preschool nearby, um, sometimes, whether it's daycare or preschool, it's nice when the state is covering the cost of that. And listen, as someone who sent my kids to daycare and to a preschool of sorts, like I cannot tell you how beneficial that was for my family. Wait, why are they filing a lawsuit instead of just praying? Oh, I'm sorry. No, prayer only counts when kids are getting murdered in school or when a Republican says something racist. Then you pray about it. But if you actually want something to change, then no, then you filed the lawsuit and asked your buddies on the Supreme Court because, that actually matters. Everything else, you can ask God for help because even they know it's BS. Did you know Jesus never read the New Testament? What? He didn't read his autobiography. That's crazy.